Welcome to a new episode of ServiceNow Space. In today's video, we'll be talking about the MFA enforcement process and have a look around the properties which would guide them. If you have just upgraded to Yokohama or you have got a new instance of Yokohama, it's likely that the instance would have the MFA already enabled on it. However, it would not challenge unless you configure it with the MFA criteria and MFA context. And before you set that for your organization, you also need to plan for its enforcement. And there are 4 properties which will guide you in the process. And these are the ones which are listed on this slide. So let's talk about these properties. So the first property is for the enforcement acknowledgement. The second property talks about the user message for MFA enrollment. The third property talks about the enrollment period after the upgrade or when you enable MFA on the Yokohama instance. And then the last property talks about the maximum relaxation time a user could get if they have not already logged into the system after the upgrade. We'll talk about it in depth in later slides. So let's move on to the first property of our video, which is the enforcement acknowledgement. Now this property is a kind of guide to the admins which will make sure that you have read and understood the MFA process and the related configuration. This is just a way to tell ServiceNow that you have read all the documents related to MFA which has been given here. If you don't acknowledge it to true, then the admins are prompted with MFA enforcement message every time they log in. Now, after you have set this property to true, let's move on to the next property, which is the multi-factor enforcement show user info message glide authenticate. It's a system property with a big name, but it's also important in the enforcement process since it's the property which would prompt the users to enroll for the MFA. This property works in conjunction with the next property I'll be talking about, and it's related to the enrollment period. Set this to true after setting the enrollment period. So let's go to the next slide and understand how we can set the enrollment period. So this is the third property for the enforcement process, and it's the enrollment period property. And as the name suggests, it's the time window given to the users to help them enroll for MFA during the defined enrollment period. The max grace period for MFA enrollment soon after the upgrade is 90 days. If you enter anything beyond 90 days for this property, it would be treated as 90 days only. Now there are different scenarios associated with this enrollment period, and it could be really tricky. Now let's understand one of the use case. Now suppose if the enrollment period is set to 90 days and the user has actually logged in soon after the Yokohama upgrade and the user has not enrolled on the MFA functionality for the first 90 days of the upgrade, then what happens? The user will be challenged for MFA after the completion of 90 days. Now take another example. What if somebody has not logged in during the 90 days of enrollment period and say log in after 170th day after the upgrade? Would the users be enforced to MFA or they would be given some relaxation? Yes, they would be given some relaxation only if the admins configure the next property, which is known as enforcement max relaxation period. Now this would give the relaxation period after the initial grace period of 90 days for a user to enroll for MFA. Now suppose if a user logs in after 170th day after the upgrade, then the user is given a message for enrollment to the MFA. They are not challenged or they are not asked to set up their MFA on the 170th day. And that's the beauty of this particular system property. So if you want to give some relaxation to users, if they are logging in late into the system, then they still have chance to understand the enrollment process and enroll with the MFA. Okay, now with all these properties, you have set up the MFA, you have read the MFA as an admin, you have read the MFA process as an admin, you have configured the enrollment period, you know that your users are getting enrollment messages when they log in. So everything is ready. You have also defined the relaxation period so that your users do not get enforced by the MFA if they are logging in late, say after 90 days of the upgrade. You have tackled everything in the MFA process. But how do you know which users are getting tracked, which users are getting enforced with the MFA? Is there a table or is there a dashboard where you can go and exactly see which users are getting tracked or which users are already enforced or which users are bypassed of MFA? Is there a possibility? The answer is yes. And the name of the table is Sys User MFA Enforcement Info. And this is the table where it holds all the user tracking information. It would list the user and the related tracking information with the user. And it's a great resource for the platform admins and product owners to see which users are compliant with the MFA and which are yet to enroll for a MFA on the platform. Now, what if there is a delay in the procurement of the MFA devices? It could be your company mobile devices which are set for procurement but has not been delivered, or it could be just your hardware keys which are procured but not yet delivered. So in those cases, it is likely that you may like to extend your MFA enforcement, or you may just like to disable MFA for some time until and unless the devices are delivered to the respective teams. How do you handle the situation? Is there a way I can quickly disable it? Is it possible? The answer is yes, it is. And that could be done using this particular property, which is multi-factor disable reason. So this is a choice list based system property. So this is the property using which you can set a reason why you are disabling MFA. By doing that, you are 100% sure that the users of the platform would not be challenged for MFA. So enough of these boring slides. Let's get into the system and see some of the use cases of MFA and the system properties. Okay, we are on the login page of the instance now, and let's log in using an admin account so that I can show you the properties which has been configured for this instance. Okay, now this instance is already configured with the FIDO2 based MFA, and that's the reason we are getting this MFA prompt, which is the secondary authentication. So I would just do my MFA for this instance. So I'll pass on a security key, and then I will use my Yubikey biometric scan to log in into the instance. Okay, now one thing to see on the screen is this particular prompt on the top. So this is basically the acknowledgement message which the admin is getting, which we talked about on the slides, right? So after the upgrade, the admin has to go and read all the documents around the multi-factor authentication. And this property is basically a guide for the admins so that they can go and read about MFA and plan their MFA implementation on the instance. Let's go and see the properties which are available on this instance. Okay, so we are on the properties page, and let's look for the properties which are associated with the multi-factor authentication. So as you can see here, there are total 13 properties around the multi-factor authentication, and many of them, which are the important ones, we have already discussed in the presentation, right? So the focus for this demo would be only 4 properties, I believe, 4 or 5 properties. And the properties which I want to show is this one, which basically talks about the 90 days of enrollment after the upgrade or after you get the instance with YOKOHAMA installed. So within 90 days of the upgrade, or being on Yokohama, the MFA users, they need to enroll themselves for MFA, or they would keep getting a information message asking them to get enrolled for MFA. So the self-enrollment period basically ranges from 0 to 90 days only. So I'll set it back to 90s, because even if I set anything beyond 90, it won't be accepted for the self-enrollment. The second property which we saw was the relaxation period. So this is the property, enforcement relaxation period. So this is the property which defines after 90 days what is the range of days till which the MFA would be relaxed. So this is the property which controls the maximum relaxation. Now suppose if a user has logged in on the 260th day of the upgrade, so they would still get 10 days to enroll for the MFA. If they do not enroll within the 10 days after 260 days of upgrade, they would be enforced for MFA. So the next time they log in using their username and password, they would be asked to set up the MFA. Next, I wanted to show about the properties which controls the user information message on MFA for the enrollment. And this is the property, right, we talked about. So this is the property which would control the MFA enrollment message for the users who are the MFA users. And how do you define a MFA users? You set the criteria, right? I mean, when you upgrade to Yokohama, the MFA gets auto-enabled, and then you have to set up a MFA criteria so that you know who are the users who would be challenged for MFA. So all those users would get a show user info message. So this is the property which controls the MFA enrollment message for the users. Now let's see the property which controls the MFA guidance message for the admins, and that's this message which is appearing on the top. So we'll go and see which property does it. Okay, this is this property. So let me open the property. If you see, this is the acknowledgement message property which controls the message which appears for the admin to review the MFA configurations and informations around all the different properties around the MFA. And you can see here that the message also has a KB link, which basically has all the details related to MFA implementation. And as an admin, I'm getting this message here because this property is set to false. If I set this property to true, that would mean that I have gone through the guidance from ServiceNow around the MFA policy and the implementation configuration around it. Now, since we have already implemented the MFA on this instance and we are aware of the MFA configuration and the security configurations around it, I would go and set this property to true, that yes, it's an acknowledgement saying that yes, I have read through the document. I know the pros and cons enabling the MFA. I know our security policy, and I accept all the behavior around the MFA functionality on this platform. So I would go and set it to save. So those were the four main properties which I wanted to discuss. So I would go and see if setting that property to true would actually disable the message. Okay, I've logged into the system. Do I get that message? No, I don't, because I have acknowledged the MFA guide. Next, let's see how this MFA would impact the users, those who are logging in after the upgrade to Yokohama. Let's pick up a user who would have, say, user admin role, because that's the MFA criteria which we have set, right? So let's pick up the user able tutor. So let's try to log in using able tutor. So I would log out from admin account and I would try to log in using the able user. So I've logged in using the user admin user, and as expected, you can see here that the user is getting this message to enroll for the MFA. This message also gives the guidance to enroll for MFA. So how you can enroll for MFA? You can do it through your user profile. So for the end users, they can go to their user profile and set an MFA option for them. And from here, you can also see that out of 90 days, 7 days has already elapsed for this user. So this user has logged in right after the upgrade, and the MFA countdown for this user has already started. So this was Able Tutor. Let's log out and let's see how we can track the MFA enforcement. Okay, we are into the instance, and now let's see how we can track the MFA enforcement for all the users on this platform. So I would go to the table called SysUser MFA Enforcement Information. This is the table which tracks all the users who would log in into the platform and fall under the MFA criteria. So from here we can see that Able Tutor is having the status as tracking because Able has not yet enrolled for the MFA, and Able is getting tracked of the MFA timeline, which is of 90 days. And we can also see that there is another user, Bridget Potela, who has self-enrolled using the MFA. Okay, let's go and see whether this user has actually enrolled for the MFA. So how would I do that? I would go to the user's profile, and from here you don't see the MFA link, but you would need to log in using this user. So I would go and log out from admin. Okay, let's log in using Bridget. Now you can see here, Bridget has got a different screen for MFA. On the screen, we can see that Bridget has actually adopted the TOTP based authentication. That means the user has basically used the app based authentication for the MFA. So let's log in with the app based authentication. So the user would go to the app and look out for the one-time password code. And after the user enters this code, the user is able to log in. That's the MFA for this user, and user would not get any guidance for the or information for the MFA because the user has already enrolled for MFA. So now we have seen that how the MFA could be enforced using different properties which is available with the MFA functionality. So we have got the 90 days enrollment period, we have got the 270 days of relaxation period which you can configure for your users. Then there are info messages for the admin and for the users which could be configured in the process of MFA enforcement for an organization into the ServiceNow instance. And the last property which I wanted to pick up for this demo is the multi-factor disable reason functionality. So using this property, you can actually set the reason why you are disabling MFA on this platform, and this would give you a convenience to turn off the MFA. So let's try it out. So I'll go to the category so that I can try this property out. So I would set this property to say users, say turning it off temporarily. So I would click on the save button. The property is set. Now let's see if alone this property would disable the MFA, because if you see the multi-factor properties, the enable multi-factor is still on, and we have the multi-factor criteria set as true, and our context is also enabled, because these are the important configuration which controls the MFA, right? Just by disabling that property would actually disable the MFA or not, we are not sure, right? So let's test it out. Just log in as an admin. So we have seen that just setting that property alone would not help. So that would not actually disable the MFA. Then what is the importance of that policy? We'll talk about that in some time. So let's go to the sys properties table again. Let's go to the property again. And let's take this value out for now. Because we have seen just setting this value alone would not help, right? So what is the importance of this property? So from the multi-factor, if I go to properties, the properties which you get here are listed here as well. So either you go from here or this UI page-based display. It's up to your choice, but I prefer this because this gives you more context and detailing. So I would just go and try to disable the MFA. Would I be able to do that? Let's try it out. Do you see that? I'm not allowed to disable because ServiceNow has enforced MFA on my platform. I cannot just go and disable it. So how do I disable it? And that's where exactly the other property comes in picture, which is the disable reason. So what I have to do is, first I have to set a value for this one so that I give an explanation or a reason why I want to shut down the MFA, why I want to disable the MFA. So let's save this property now. So it has been set as temporary reason. And now let's try to disable the MFA. So what does it say? Restricting deactivation of multi-factor authentication property as adaptive. Oh, so we have got the adaptive property also enabled, and that is one more reason I cannot go and directly disable the multi-factor. So I have to go to the adaptive property or the adaptive authentication. So let me go to the adaptive authentication and I have to turn it off. Okay, now I have turned off the adaptive authentication. I have given the MFA reason. Now let's see, can we disable the MFA now? Let me refresh this page. So I would now go ahead and disable it. Yes, now I can disable the multi-factor authentication. And to be on the safer side, I would also say that go and disable the criteria too, so that MFA is not challenged in any way. I think we are good. We have given a reason, we have disabled the adaptive authentication, we have disabled the MFA, we have taken away the criteria, we have disabled it, and let's see how, if we can now get rid of MFA. There you go. The MFA has been taken away now. So if there is a need to disable the MFA temporarily or for a time period, you can use these properties. So the reason and the adaptive authentication, and then you can disable the multi-factor authentication and you are good to go. Again, you should not be turning off the MFA because MFA gives you another layer of security for your instance. And when you enable MFA, you are actually increasing your security posture of the system. Your hardening score of the system goes up with the MFA implementation, and it's always recommended that you have at least 2 layers of authentication to your system. So this was all for today's video. I hope I have been able to shed some light on the nitty-gritties of the MFA. and I hope that this would help you with your own journey of MFA implementation for your organization. Thank you very much. See you with another video.